5 years ago, I was playing basketball and I was running really quick down the court, and I stopped too quickly and I ended up tearing my ACL. So I thought, no big deal, you know, people tear their ACLs all the time. And that's what the surgeon told me. He said it's a great surgery, it's going to be quick and you're going to be in and out and it's going to be done with. Little did I know that that was not going to be my experience. So about 3 days after the surgery, I started just feeling really funny. And I had called my mom and I said, hey mom, I'm feeling funny. I stand up, my heart is fluttering in my chest. I'm feeling a little out of breath, I'm dizzy. And she says, you need to go to the hospital right away. Before that, I still had no feeling in my leg after I had the surgery for 3 days. I had bandages over my knee and my leg was probably swollen to about 2 or 3 times its size. And I couldn't move it and it was swollen. Up until the point to where my mother, actually the day before I called her, took my bandages off and then my legs started going down. What they think happened was the wrappings on my leg were way too tight. He wrapped them really tight and I didn't have any ice to put on it, and so it was just a recipe for disaster. I went to the ER and I got there and I just had this feeling of fear come over me. It's like they just knew that something wasn't right. I mean, within probably 1 minute, I had 15 people around me. They were boosting me up out of my wheelchair. I was crying. I didn't know why. Things just went into action mode and my heart began pounding out of my chest. I could feel it. I'd never felt it like that before. They hoisted me up onto the bed really quick. They were getting the blood pressure hooked up, they were getting an IV. I mean, it was literally like a movie. I mean, people were swirling all around me and I was looking, I was so confused and I didn't know what was happening. They had me hooked up to the heart monitor, they were measuring my heart rate, and I looked over at one point because my machine was going beep, 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 and my heart was beating at 225 beats per minute. And they were like saying, we need to get your heart rate down. We need you to bear down, push, you know, like you're having a bowel movement, squeeze. They were just trying everything they could, but my heart rate would not go down. It had been knocked out of rhythm. And so they were trying all that they could to get it down. My blood pressure was skyrocketing. I heard somebody say something about me having a stroke or a heart attack, and I knew it wasn't good. Through the crowd of people, I could see the person that brought me to the ER and her face was at the floor. I mean, she just stood there and was like, and I knew at that moment that it wasn't good. My hands started freezing up, my toes froze in crooked positions and everything was going white on me. It's almost as if in that moment, everything was starting to slow down. And I just remember looking over to the nurse that was next to me and I said, help me. And then I said, Jesus, please help me. And I said that out loud because I didn't know what was going on. I was afraid and I felt helpless and I was losing my breath and my heart was beating out of my chest. And then suddenly the doctor came up beside me. He said, we're gonna give you this medicine. It's called adenosine. And basically what it does is they inject it into your IV and it causes your heart rate to slow down to such a pace to basically it stops it to where hopefully when it restarts, it's a correct rhythm. And so he said, this is gonna feel like you're being hit by a truck. And so they got it and then he said 3, 2, 1, and he injected it right. As soon as he injected it, I felt this intense feeling from the tips of my feet and my hands, and it just came crashing down into my chest. It felt like somebody was taking my heart and just crushing it in their hand. And I literally thought at that moment I was gonna die. I felt if I had ever had a heart attack, that's probably what it felt like. And it didn't work. And so I could see the desperation on their face. It didn't work. They not only gave it to me once, but they gave it to me twice. And I thought I was going to die. I kid you not. And shortly after, they were just watching because they didn't know what to do. They would have normally given me a drug. So what had happened is when my leg was wrapped up so tight, it basically caused what's called compartment syndrome, and my leg swelled. It didn't let any blood flow in or out, and so it just swelled, the blood pooled, and I got a ton of blood clots in my legs. And as soon as my mother took off that wrapping, it came and flooded. It went through my heart and into my lungs, and at that very moment that it happened, I was in the ER. So what they normally would have done is given me a drug that would have hopefully broken those clots up, like an instant blood thinner medication, but they couldn't do that because I had a fresh wound on my leg. I just had surgery on my knee, so they couldn't do it. It was almost like they were just like sitting there like, okay, is he gonna die or is he not gonna die? And so luckily one of the nurses just out of nowhere said, hey, let's try sticking his head into a bucket of ice water. And I'm like, what? I mean, of course I'm not thinking that at the moment, but looking back, I'm like, what? So she ran off, got a ginormous bucket of ice water. I mean, this was like a 5-gallon bucket, and they threw me to the side of the bed, and one of the nurses grabbed the back of my neck, and I mean, they just plunged my head down into the ice water, and I mean, I'm coming up gasping for air, and they just did it 3, 4, 5 times in a row, and I'm like gasping for air, and it was almost like I was being waterboarded or some kind of torture. And as soon as I came back up though, I heard the sound that they were all waiting for. The machine started slowing down, my heart rate was slowing down, and apparently the shock of it all was enough to kick my heart back into the right rhythm and, you know, get my body calmed down. So after that, I probably stayed in the ER for about 5 hours. They were monitoring me, and they moved me into the critical condition shortly thereafter, to where basically they were just watching. So the extent of it was I had clots in my calf, I had them in my thigh, I had them on both sides of my lungs in multiple locations. And throughout this whole entire process, it just rattled me. It shook my whole entire world. I didn't know up from down. I was confused. I was scared. At any moment, I'm thinking, I'm gonna die. And the doctor comes up to my mom when she arrived a few hours later after everything had happened, and he said, look, it's like your son had been in a head-on collision with a train and survived. He goes, it's a miracle. He's lucky to be alive. And looking back now, I know the statistics for somebody surviving that is 1 in 3, just for one pulmonary embolism. And I had multiple. My hospital stay was nothing short of dramatic. Of course, it had to match the experience 100% tit for tat. And after a few days, I was transferred to another hospital to be placed in an ICU area, and they're basically just monitoring me, you know, making sure that I was stable as far as my blood clots went. And it was probably a week and a half before I got up out of bed for the first time. And my knee was in so much pain. I couldn't bend it, I couldn't walk. Matter of fact, when I first stood up, I blacked out and fell back into my bed because I'd not been up, I'd not eaten in almost a week. I was just taking crackers and water for my medication. Throughout the whole entire time in the hospital, I had infection after infection. From the blood clots, they think I got a 104-degree fever, and I mean, I was just miserably sick. They were taking all my blankets off and putting ice, you know, in my armpits, in my neck, in my crotch. They're just, it was like a prison sentence. And shortly after that, they decided that they were going to give me some heavy antibiotics because they thought I had an infection. And from that, I got another infection, a stomach infection. And so I had to stay in the hospital even longer until I got rid of the infection in my stomach. And so it was just nothing short of dramatic. And that whole entire experience rocked my world. I mean, I was an anxious mess from there on out. And you know, I'm lucky to be alive, and I thank God every day. And it wasn't just that the hospital experience was the worst. It affected me for the next 3-4 years. Even today, I still deal with it some days, the anxiety. I did 2 years of counseling. I went to probably near 100 doctor's visits, getting treated for various symptoms and signs and all kinds of different things. And through the process, I had everything in my life stripped away. I had all my comfort. Every one of my beliefs that I thought were so foundational were pulled right out from underneath me. And I was left with nothing. And it was because of that I came to the realization that nothing else was going to get me through. Nothing was working. I was still having breathing difficulties. I was still getting sick. And it seemed like forever before I was finally back to normal. But I learned that the only thing that was going to get me through was Jesus. He became my lifeblood. The Bible talks about how the things of this world are fleeting and we can't hold on to anything. And Christ used this situation. He didn't cause it. He used it though for his glory to show me that he was my lifeblood. And lifeblood, the definition is literally that thing that you cannot live without. You can't survive without it. And Christ showed me that was him. He is my lifeblood. I could do everything that I could to fix myself, to get myself better, but it wasn't going to be enough, because he's the one that can take you from literally like I was on the doorstep of death, and he can bring you to a place of life. He can take that broken down situation and turn it around for his glory. There isn't a thing that he cannot do. He can take every situation and turn it for glory. For he can use your life and your situation in ways that you never thought. But sometimes it takes certain situations, it takes a tragedy or sorrow or pain to understand that he is everything. He is your life, and he is the way and the truth. And when everything else in this world will fail, I promise you, I guarantee it, I'll bank my life on it, he will not fail, because he is the only lifeblood that will keep